In 79 AD, far beneath Rome's noisiest arena, a 19-year-old Dacian woman named Sabina stood in chains inside a lightless stone cell. Above her head, 50,000 Romans were screaming in triumph, celebrating a gladiator who had just slaughtered her brothers in front of the crowd. What happened to Sabina during the next 3 hours became one of the most carefully hidden practices in Roman history. It was a ritual so brutal that even Rome's own historians argued over whether it should be recorded at all. This is the story Roman senators tried to erase from memory, the reward that transformed a victorious fighter into someone who could do almost anything once the gates were closed. Before we dive in, if you enjoy dark and forgotten history, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps us keep making videos like this. Now, back to the story. Did Roman entertainment go too far, or was this simply the real cost of empire? What you're about to hear comes directly from the writings of Cassius Dio, supported by archaeological excavations conducted beneath the Colosseum in 2018 and reinforced by Senate records preserved in the Vatican archives. This is not legend. These events were real, officially classified by Rome as entertainment. They reveal the truth behind the blood-soaked arenas spread across the empire during the 1st century AD. The Colosseum was more than a structure. It was Rome's physical symbol of domination. Completed only a year earlier, in AD 80, it was massive enough to consume entire armies. The air inside was always thick with the smell of iron, sweat, and animals. The sand covering the arena floor was not decorative. It existed to absorb whatever spilled from dying men and torn beasts. Beneath that sand was a complex network of tunnels and cages holding Rome's most valuable resources: the condemned, the captured, the conquered. Gladiatorial games were never just about spectacle. They were political theater, religious ceremony, and social terror combined into a single event. When General Marcus Antonius crushed the Dacian rebellion in 78 AD, he returned to Rome with more than plunder. He brought back 847 captives. Among them were 124 noble women. These women were not peasants or bystanders. They were daughters of leaders, wives of chiefs, trained fighters and priestesses. Rome did not simply want to defeat their people. It needed to break them so thoroughly that rebellion would never rise again. And now, the victor and the condemned finally faced one another. Gaius Valerius Maximus was 32 years old and stood close to 6 feet tall, an imposing height by Roman standards. His body told the story of his life, scar after scar marking victories, deaths, and the cheers of the crowd. He had been born into slavery after his father died imprisoned for unpaid debts, and for 14 brutal years he fought simply to survive. In official matches alone, he had killed 89 men. His ambition was modest and clear: to earn the wooden sword of freedom, the rudis. His greatest fear was dying without a name, dragged from the arena on iron hooks like so many before him. But on this August afternoon in 79 AD, he defeated the Dacian champion in full view of Emperor Titus himself. The reward followed established custom: 500 denarii, a laurel crown, and first choice among the captured women. Sabina stood in a holding cell with 17 other women, her dark Highland hair and pale skin setting her apart. Before Rome burned her village, she had been promised to a warrior named Decebalus, who had been killed by Roman soldiers 3 months earlier. Now she waited in silence, her past erased, her future stripped away. She wanted nothing but dignity and death. What terrified her most was becoming part of the spectacle for the same crowd that had celebrated the destruction of her people.
That morning, a guard told her she had been selected for the afternoon's event. She didn't yet understand what that meant. She was about to discover that Rome's idea of mercy could be more horrifying than its cruelty. This was never about individual lives, it was psychological warfare. Rome understood that conquering land was not enough. True domination meant destroying symbols, corrupting traditions, and proving that even the most protected members of a society, its women, now belonged to Rome. This was not random violence, it was deliberate dehumanization, a message sent to every conquered land. Defying Rome was useless, losing to Rome was total. What happened that day became so infamous that the Senate would soon be forced to intervene. At exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as shadows stretched across the blood-soaked arena, the master of the games descended into the hypogeum beneath the Colosseum. The corridor smelled of damp stone and fear. He approached Gaius Valerius Maximus carrying a bronze tablet listing the available spoils. Gaius's hands were still trembling from combat, adrenaline still surging through his body.
"The Emperor recognizes your victory," the official announced. "By imperial custom, you may claim the spoils of conquest. Make your choice." No one present realized that this ordinary ritual, repeated countless times before, would ignite a scandal that would reach the Senate within weeks. The bronze tablet listed the options clearly: gold, fine wine, a night in a real bed, or victoria carnalis, the carnal privilege granted to the victor. For a man who owned nothing and lived with death hanging over him every day, this moment represented one of the only times he ever held true power. Roman culture didn't just allow this practice, it glorified it. In Rome's worldview, the defeated existed solely to serve the winner. That belief sat at the very heart of the empire, refined and reinforced over generations. The preparations began. In the holding area where the women were kept, a different kind of preparation was already underway. Guards entered carrying buckets of water, not for drinking, but for washing the prisoners. The women were scrubbed clean, their tangled hair combed out, their torn clothing replaced with plain tunics. Sabina watched as attendants moved down the line, stopping at each woman, inspecting them closely, recording details on wax tablets. An older woman, a priestess named Zamaxis, once devoted to the Dacian sun temple, leaned close and whispered the truth everyone feared. "They're preparing us either for the spectacle or for what comes after." The process didn't take long, but elsewhere in the arena, something far worse was being arranged, something that would transform a routine act of exploitation into a controversy historians would argue over for centuries. Above them, 50,000 spectators packed the Colosseum for the afternoon's lesser entertainments. Between major gladiator bouts, officials staged what they called interludes, mock hunts, scripted skirmishes, and so-called mythological reenactments, performances that often forced condemned prisoners to reenact famous legends, ending in very real deaths. But today's presentation carried a new purpose. It was a theatrical demonstration meant to celebrate Rome's dominance and the humiliation of the conquered. The signal was given. 20 Dacian women were raised into the arena through the underground lift system, an engineering marvel designed to make animals, fighters, and props burst suddenly from hidden trapdoors. Sabina emerged into blinding sunlight and a wall of sound. The crowd's roar struck her like a physical force. She smelled food roasting at vendor stalls, heavy perfume drifting down from the elite seating, and beneath it all, the metallic scent of old blood baked into the sand. What should have been a simple execution had been transformed into something far more deliberate, an act designed not just to kill, but to degrade, to dominate, and to send a message that would linger long after the screams faded. The women were lined up while a herald loudly read out the charges they were accused of: rebellion,
helping Rome's enemies and refusing to honor the Roman gods. Then came the cruel twist that no one had expected. They would be forced to fight each other in pairs, using wooden swords while dressed in torn clothing meant to humiliate them. Those who won would be taken by Rome's champions. Those who lost would be killed. If this level of calculated cruelty shocks you, it should, because what followed proved this was not random violence, it was deliberate policy. This was the breaking point. Wooden swords were handed out to the women. Sabina wrapped her fingers around hers, feeling the rough wood scrape against her palm. Standing across from her was Camassicus, Dillas's sister, the woman who had once taught Livia how to weave and had sung at her engagement celebration. Their eyes met, and neither looked away. The crowd screamed for blood. The master of the games raised his hand, then dropped it. Still, neither woman moved. The roar of the crowd shifted as excitement turned into confusion and then into rage. "Fight!" people shouted. Insults began to rain down, along with olive pits, scraps of food, and anything else the spectators could throw. Even then, the women did not raise their swords. Refusal was the last form of resistance they had left. For 90 full seconds, the greatest empire on earth was openly defied by two unarmed women who simply stood still. Then the guards rushed in. The staged drama collapsed into real violence. Camassicus was struck from behind with the flat of a sword and fell hard onto the sand. The crowd cheered. Sabina screamed and ran toward her, letting the wooden sword fall from her hand. Both women were dragged away, not to execution, but to something the audience found just as entertaining. The true horror began below, in the hypogeum. The bureaucratic machine of Roman exploitation continued without pause. A scribe calmly entered a note into the official record. 20 female captives of Dacian origin processed for post-victory allocation. Then another line followed. 2 resistant subjects transferred to private chambers for exclusive use by champions. What followed became one of Rome's most refined systems of dehumanization. Human beings were reduced to inventory. Sabina and Camassicus were separated and taken to different rooms. Each chamber was small and made of stone, with a simple bench, iron rings set into the walls, and doors that locked only from the outside.
Everything about the rooms was clean, orderly, and frightening precisely because it was all carefully planned. This was not cruelty done on impulse. These chambers were built into the arena on purpose, just as deliberately as the lion cages or the elevators that lifted gladiators to the sand. At 4 o'clock, Gaius Valerius Maximus entered Sabina's chamber. When the door opened, their eyes met. He was still wearing his full arena armor, with another man's blood smeared across his chest. She was pressed against the far wall, exhausted and defenseless. Between them stood the full authority of Roman law. He held absolute legal power. She held none. She was officially classified as spoils, a reward earned through killing. History does not tell us what Gaius was thinking in that moment. Did he see a human being? Did he see property? Did he question the system that had turned him into both a weapon and a captive of the empire? All we know comes from a clerk's routine report, not from either of them. Then something unimaginable happened, an act of defiance. Gaius removed his helmet, set his sword aside, and sat down with his head in his hands. For 5 long minutes he said nothing. Sabina stood frozen, preparing herself for violence that never came. At last he spoke in broken Dacian, a language he had learned from other prisoners. "What was his name?" he asked. "Mine," she answered. "No," he said. "The man they made you watch die." "Disabilis." "No, the one from today." She shook her head. He sighed. "I killed a Dacian today," he said. "He could have been family. Your people use that name often." What followed was not the assault Rome expected. It was a conversation between two people the empire had tried to strip of every trace of humanity. Gaius spoke about his father, who was executed when he was 9 years old. Sabina told him how her home had been burned to the ground. 2 hours passed. Guards checked the chamber twice, heard voices, assumed compliance, and moved on. At 6 in the evening, Gaius Valerius Maximus made a decision Rome would never forgive. He stood up, walked to the door, and called for a guard. "This woman is ill," he said. "She is infected. I refuse the allocation. Send her to the physician." It was the only loophole the arena system allowed. If a captive was officially declared diseased, a gladiator could legally reject her and return her to general prisoner status. The lie was obvious. The guard understood it immediately, but Roman bureaucracy depended on rigid procedure. Challenging a gladiator's choice required paperwork, witnesses, and a formal inquiry. Accepting the rejection took only seconds. And so Sabina was removed and taken to the medical holding area, sealing her immediate fate. She still died 3 days later from a simple infection, the most common cause of death inside Roman captivity.
The medical ward was crowded, dirty, and deeply indifferent to suffering. The small mercy that saved her from one kind of horror delivered her straight into another. Gaius never saw her again. That same month, he fought 2 more matches. He won both, and both times he refused the rewards. The empire reacted with shock. Rumors spread through the gladiator quarters. They said Maximus had gone weak. They said he had joined some strange Eastern cult that preached compassion. Others claimed he had been cursed by Dacian witches. The truth was far simpler. He had remembered what it meant to be human. The breaking point came on September 15, 79 AD. Senator Quintus Aurelius Semicus appeared before the Senate with a formal complaint. His young nephew, a junior gladiator, had been beaten by his trainer for refusing the customary reward after a victory. The nephew claimed he had been inspired by Maximus's example. The trainer argued that he was only enforcing proper Roman values. Normally, it would have been a minor case, hardly worth debate, but it forced Rome's most powerful men to publicly acknowledge a practice everyone knew existed but never openly discussed. The Senate records that survived, carefully cleaned of detail, mention a debate about the appropriateness of certain customs involving defeated female captives. That mild wording hid a 4-hour political battle over whether Rome had crossed a line even its own senators could no longer ignore. The conservative faction, led by Senator Fabius, defended tradition. They argued that Rome's ancestors had conquered both body and spirit, and that this harsh dominance was the foundation of Roman greatness. The reformist faction, influenced by Stoic thought and practical concerns, pushed back. They warned that Rome was creating martyrs and planting the seeds of rebellion. Dead rebels disappeared, they said, but traumatized survivors carried memories that fueled uprisings for generations. Still, the real trigger was not morality, it was political survival. 3 provincial governors had recently reported rising revolts. Each report mentioned Rome's treatment of captive women being used as propaganda by resistance movements. The governors warned that Rome was no longer intimidating its enemies, it was radicalizing them. The empire was damaging itself. The law that stunned Rome followed soon after. On October 1, 79 AD, the Senate passed what later historians would call the Lex Captivorum, the law concerning captive women. Its provisions were limited, but they were unprecedented.
Female prisoners of war could no longer be handed out as public rewards inside the arena. Public humiliation of conquered women was officially banned from state-sponsored spectacles. Private abuse still continued behind closed doors, but turning it into a public show was now illegal. Enforcement was inconsistent. Many arena officials ignored the rule or found ways around it, but the principle itself mattered. Even Rome, brutal as it was, admitted there were limits it could not openly cross. Ironically, the law did not actually free anyone. It simply removed the crowd. 3 months later, Gaius Valerius Maximus finally earned his freedom, not because of mercy, but because he survived 5 more consecutive victories. The last recorded act of his life as a free man was buying the freedom of a Dacian woman named Camosicus. The records preserve only her name. Most historians believe she was the same woman who had stood beside Sabina on the arena floor. Imagine Gaius realizing that his single act of defiance saved one woman, and only for a short time. It did nothing for the thousands who suffered before her, or the thousands who would suffer after. The system was too vast, too profitable, and too deeply rooted in Roman culture. His resistance was a single drop falling into an ocean of blood. Now imagine Sabina's final hours. She died from a simple, preventable infection, surrounded by other prisoners the empire never even bothered to record. No senator debated her death, no historian wrote down her name. In Rome's moral accounting, her suffering was too small to matter. The tragedy is not simply that Rome was cruel. Cruelty was a normal part of ancient warfare. The real tragedy is that Rome perfected it. It turned cruelty into entertainment, formalized it through bureaucracy, and built it into stone with supply chains, paperwork, and architectural planning. It became a system so complete that people vanished inside it, leaving behind nothing but scratches carved into walls. In 2018, archaeologists from the University of Rome, led by Dr. Isabella Fortunato, excavated a forgotten section of the eastern hypogeum. What they uncovered never appeared in tourist brochures. They found a cluster of small chambers with iron restraints embedded directly into the walls. Drainage channels had been carved into the stone floors. There were scratch marks left by desperate hands. Fragments of pottery used to carry water or food lay scattered across the ground. Compressed remains of bedding showed where bodies had rested for years. Carbon dating confirmed the chambers dated back to the original construction around 80 AD. They were not later additions. They had been planned from the beginning. 6 bronze tags were recovered, each stamped with the word captiva and dated between 79 and 82 AD. Those dates matched exactly with the years of the Dacian suppression.
These discoveries lined up closely with what written sources suggest. Later writings by Cassius Dio describe special chambers used to assign conquered women. Earlier letters by Seneca make indirect references to the practice, though without detail. Tacitus, who is usually explicit, says nothing at all, which suggests the subject may have been too disturbing even for him to describe openly. Historians still argue about how often this happened. Some believe it was rare and limited to major victories. Others point to the purpose-built rooms, the amount of physical evidence, and multiple written sources to argue it was a regular part of the system. The most likely truth sits in between, not constant, but common enough to justify permanent infrastructure. Gladiators were treated like ancient celebrities, but with a deeply disturbing contradiction. Elite women bribed guards to gain access to them. Oil lamps and wall paintings show gladiators posed nude with their weapons. Their sweat and blood were sold as aphrodisiacs, and some women even drank them as supposed fertility treatments. The same society that idolized these men also sent them into death machines and rewarded them with human lives. Historical records describe late-night gatherings after major games where wealthy patrons mingled with gladiators and enslaved people. Women captured in war were displayed as trophies and sometimes forced to reenact myths involving gods like Jupiter or Mars before being given away. Prisoners were stripped during triumphal parades. Some victims were tied to stakes to imitate myths before execution. Enemy queens were paraded publicly and then handed over to generals. None of this was random. It was a deliberate message. Rome owned your past, your present, and your future. Gladiator games were not chaotic events. They were part of the munera, public obligations owed to the people. Those who sponsored the games were rewarded for increasing spectacle. Humiliation of captives became a selling point. The 19th century historian Theodore Mommsen called this Rome's most efficient system of dehumanization. What he meant was simple. Rome did not just conquer bodies, it conquered identity, memory, and meaning. The fact that we are still debating these events today shows how deep the damage runs. The 2000 film Gladiator barely touched on this reality, hinting at it only in shadows. Even modern scholars disagree over whether discussing these practices responsibly exposes Roman brutality or risks turning it into spectacle once again. But this history matters. It shows how a civilization can defend cruelty through law, tradition, and entertainment. Rome was not the only empire capable of horror, but it perfected the art of normalizing it, turning violence into ritual and suffering into public amusement.
The deeper truth is this. The line between civilization and barbarism has never been measured by marble temples, paved roads, or towering arches. It has always been measured by how a society treats people who have absolutely no power. Rome built aqueducts that lasted for 2,000 years, yet at the same time it constructed chambers beneath its arenas where human beings were abused as casually as stage props. Its brilliance and its moral emptiness existed side by side, without contradiction. This story also shows how power distorts everyone it touches. Gaius was both a victim and a tool. He was enslaved, controlled, and forced to kill to survive, yet he was also granted authority over someone even more helpless than himself. The system twisted ordinary people into instruments of cruelty and turned human suffering into entertainment when it should have stirred empathy instead of applause. It warns us about the danger of using tradition as moral justification. Our ancestors did it, became Rome's answer to every ethical question, until habit replaced humanity and atrocity became routine. And it raises questions we still struggle with today. What other buried horrors lie beneath the monuments we admire? How many tourist attractions rest on layers of forgotten misery? When does confronting the past become necessary, and when does it cross the line into exploitation? Think of Sabina's final moments, dying from an infection in a cramped cell beneath the grandest structure of her age. Did she wonder if anyone would remember her? Did she imagine that 2,000 years later, archaeologists might find her tag and speak her name out loud again? History's darkest stories remind us that progress is never guaranteed. Civilizations fall morally long before they collapse physically, and every generation must choose between empathy and efficiency. Rome chose spectacle. The cost was measured in erased lives, but the lesson survives in the ruins beneath the arena floor. A gladiator's victory became permission for cruelty. A routine reward became one of Rome's most carefully buried scandals. Hundreds of Dacian captives vanished into bureaucratic records, and one young woman named Sabina survived only because a single fighter made an unusual choice, a choice that changed nothing, except proving that humanity could still flicker even inside Rome's darkest machinery. If these hidden moments of history resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing this community come together from so many countries and cultures.